I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. I'm George Harvey. This is Tom Fennell.
I'm Tom Fennell.
Yeah. And what this is based on is every day I get up early and look at the news, and I run a blog that has links to the various news items I find, which of late there have been anywhere from 10 to 16 a day. It takes me about 2.5 to 3 hours to find them. And I keep that blog for anybody who wants to go to it. It's called geoharvey.wordpress.com. I also write for Green Energy Times. Green Energy Times. There it is.
Hey.
Don't say I didn't warn you. So we've got a lot of information, and I figured I would share it with people on television. And so we are starting with last Friday, a week ago today, a week ago tomorrow, sorry. It's my mind being what it is.
A week ago today. Yeah, right.
That's what it is.
Life, you know, sometimes it's hard to keep up.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Last Friday, 4th of April, we had a report which had been promised from ExxonMobil, and the article that I have on my website comes from a magazine called Resilience. The report released by ExxonMobil shows how greenhouse gas emissions and climate change factor into its business model, and specifically what they're saying is that climate change and global climate policies are, in their words, highly unlikely to stop it from selling fossil fuels for decades to come.
Yeah, there's a real deep story here.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of this, and the response to this I've got an article in here which tells the response from
Bill McKibben.
Bill McKibben. I did not include the one because it was a little bit vague that came from the UN. But if you read the UN's response, this is from Cristina Figueres. If you read her response and you kind of read between the lines, they're basically, what she's saying basically is, okay, you don't want to play that game, we'll play it for you.
Well, what I take out of this was Exxon had no intention of doing any of this.
That's right.
And then some renegade stockholders made a big fuss at the meeting, apparently enough of a fuss for Exxon to turn around and say, well, we'll open the books a little bit and let you get a peek.
Yeah, right.
And then after all was said and done, they said, okay, guys. And then they made an obscene gesture and said, we're not going to do anything about it. We own that stuff. We're going to burn it.
Yes, and the UN response was, you may think you're going to burn it, but we're going to make sure that you keep 75% of it in the ground.
Well, so here's Mr. McKibben.
We're going to get to that, Tom.
Okay, we'll put him on the back burner then.
We'll put him on the back burner because I've got him coming up. Anyway, that's what that was all about, and this we get back to this pretty soon. The next one I think is very exciting, and that is some material from the UN IPCC report. The IPCC is the International Panel on Climate Change. And it says that during the next 100 years, bioenergy with carbon capture and sequestration could pull 125 billion tons of carbon dioxide out of the sky, while biochar energy systems could draw down another 130 billion tons. Now, to give you an idea of what a billion tons is, in 2013, the world emitted 40 billion tons of CO2. Now, the total of those two is 255 billion tons.
These are numbers more than I can comprehend.
Well, this is, you know, if you had $1 a ton, you'd have $255 billion.
That's more than I can comprehend.
It's more than I could spend in a morning. Basically, what I'm kind of expecting, watching the trends, is that people are going to start really getting serious about global warming within a year or two of now, maybe 3 years, and the emissions are going to go down very rapidly. And I'm guessing that 40 billion tons is probably going to be reduced to about 0 by 2060 at the latest. Actually, I believe
think
it'll be.
That's reasonable to assume by that time.
Now, the Stanford University had a report, which I'm not dealing with directly today, but they're saying that by 2050 we should be able to pull 10 billion tons a year out of the atmosphere.
Well, this is a good technological fix, because we're taking that carbon out instead of putting it in.
That's right. And I think what that means is that within 50 years, we're going to have the opportunity to determine what we want the climate to be as a world. You know, the UN, the world, is going to say, this is what we want the climate to be, and we're going to get there by doing X, Y, and Z. There may be tipping points that we will not be able to back over. Hopefully that won't be the case. We've got a lot of science coming. So my expectation is that those tipping points will probably turn out not to be tipping points at all. We will be able to back over them. For example, if you want to take methane out of the air and you're at a source, UV light hitting titanium dioxide catalyzes methane into carbon dioxide and water. And with oxygen, it's an improvement. It's a big improvement. And then the carbon dioxide can be captured from by using plants. Now, this thing is very important, though, because they're referring to a technology that personally I don't believe in, and that's carbon capture and sequestration.
Yeah.
Using the normal techniques that they have talked about, which includes liquefying the carbon dioxide underwater, you know,
hiding it in caves,
things like that. There are all kinds of things that you suddenly discover that you've got a leak, and it, you know, turns out that the leak is a couple hundred years old, and the stuff is all coming back to you, and it's not working. But there is there is carbon sequestration and that is capture and sequestration that they're doing that I do believe in, and that's the biochar.
Yeah.
And there's other kinds as well. There's the kind that's called carbon farming, which is something that has been developed a little bit in Vermont. And the biochar, what you're doing in effect is you're taking a tree, cutting it up, or you're taking grass or whatever it is you're going to get char from, and you turn it into char. In the course of doing that, it emits a lot of tars, which are burned in a very highly controlled environment. And that's probably where you get your energy for the biochar. And then what you've got is charcoal made in a very specific way. You still see the grain of the wood in the charcoal if it's made from wood. And this produces a little block of charcoal that has a lot of pores in it. And when that is put in the ground, it is invaded by microbes. And that means that you've got microbes in there who are capturing nitrogen from the air, and they're converting it into nitrates that can be used by plants. So this becomes a permanent fertilizer.
A soil enhancer.
Soil enhancer.
Yeah.
It was invented by Indians in the Amazon 7,000 years ago. And it's interesting.
Can't use that. Nobody's going to get royalties.
You can use it. You can just produce it. It's like a lot of other things that people don't get royalties for, like charcoal or glass. Who invented glass? You know, we use a lot of glass.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that means that you don't have to use fossil fuels to fertilize the soil, and the soil is built up. Now, that in itself is interesting, because if you look at the carbon harvest thing, are you familiar with that, Tom? Probably not.
Right here in town?
Carbon farming, not carbon.
No, I'm not familiar with
I'm glad you mentioned that, because otherwise I would have gone on about carbon harvest, and you would have been sitting there.
Carbon farming.
Carbon farming is just the most beautiful thing. If you have 3 fields and you have a bunch of cattle, and you allow those cattle to graze the way they have typically grazed in New England, they graze until the grass is very short, less than an inch long.
And
It's not good for their teeth, by the way. They will live longer if you don't let them graze down that far.
And they loosen up the soil.
They do. They're pretty rough on the soil doing that. Now, if you let them do what they prefer to do, they will only go down to the point that the grass is about 6 inches tall, because they like the very tender stuff on the ends.
Yeah, makes sense.
When they get down to 6 inches, you say, okay, and we're going to move you into the next field over.
Okay.
Now, what that means is the grass is in a lot better shape, and instead of having roots that go down 2.5 or 3 feet, it's got roots that go down 15 feet. It recovers faster,
Okay.
and the result of that is that you can have more cattle on the same amount of land.
That sounds almost counterintuitive.
The grass
Yeah,
recovers
yeah.
faster
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
let it,
I'm sure it's right.
Yeah. So here's the deal. You think about this, what happens is the grass puts down its roots, they go down 15 feet. And what do they do down there? Eventually they die. And when they do, the carbon from the atmosphere is sequestered underground.
Stays underground.
And that's the reason why, when I was a kid living in Illinois, a local contractor was building a house, and he commented to one of the local kids that they had dug down for the basement for this house. They had gone down 15 feet and had never broken through the topsoil. The topsoil was 15 feet thick.
Wow.
And the reason was because the prairies, the grasses were just putting all that stuff underground.
Over the centuries, the topsoil
Absolutely.
was 15 feet or more thick.
That's right. And you can get topsoil to be built up a lot by using that grazing technique. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with biochar. You combine biochar with that, and you've even got a different world from that. But the point is that by changing the farming techniques that we've got, we can capture huge amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and put them underground. So,
And we're not really suffering.
no, we're
not
improving
losing anything
things.
at all.
And not losing anything, and it doesn't cost anything. And you
It's
can
just gonna
graze more
change a
cattle.
little bit of thinking.
Yeah,
little bit
it's
of,
just
techniques.
a slight change in thinking. So that's why I'm excited about that. And onwards and upwards. That, by the way, came from Environment and Energy Publishing. On the Saturday, we got from Clean Technica the news that energy efficiency contributed 63 exajoules of avoided energy in the year 2010. That's larger than the supply of oil, which is 43 exajoules, electricity or natural gas, which are 22 exajoules each.
Bottom line.
Did anybody pay attention to that? Okay, you don't have to pay attention. You don't have to know what an exajoule is. All you got to know is that the amount of exajoules of electricity that were used in 2010 was 22. The amount that came from the oil supply was 43. The amount that was avoided by efficiency was 63. So the amount of global warming that we reduced by efficiency was approximately equal to the amount of use that we had of oil and natural gas combined.
Just more of an indication that we are at least moving in the right direction.
Yeah, even though the headlines occasionally say that we're not, and there are some of this week that say that we're not, we are. And but that's an important thing. This is the first ever report of a publication called Energy Efficiency and Market Report, and that came out. You know, a lot of these reports come years after the publication of after the data was created as use rather than collated as data.
Well, as we found out here in Vermont, efficiency is the best way to save money.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
By a long shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, same day from Bloomberg, 3 major atomic accidents in 35 years are forcing the world's nuclear industry to stop imagining it can prevent more catastrophes and focus instead on how to contain them. When the next nuclear accident occurs, which it will,
Yeah.
we need to know how to limit the damage.
As long
Now-
as we're on the subject of nuclear accidents, this
Oh,
is
there
an
you go.
up-to-date picture of
Fukushima Daiichi.
Fukushima. And the reactor on the left is still smoking.
Yeah,
And this was done very recently.
yeah,
So it's going to be a long time before anything is cleaned up there.
yeah.
A long, long time.
We have 480 reactors in the world. 12 of them have experienced what are called core damage events, which are, for a practical purpose, meltdowns. I can name them. And if you want me to, I will. Do you want me to?
I
name
think you did last week.
But that's 2.5%. And with that batting record, you can expect another one at least, unless they close them all down before that, and I don't think it's going to happen. Okay, that was from Bloomberg. I mentioned that going on. Are we ready to go on? On the 6th, which is a Sunday, here we are again. Owners of at least 24 nuclear reactors across the United States will be required to undertake extensive analysis. This is in the order of, I think they said $6 million for each plant, of their structures and components, because they cannot show the reactors would withstand the most severe earthquake revised estimates say they might face.
I think they've just been avoiding that one.
Well, you know, what it reminds me of is that Jimmy Carter closed down several nuclear power plants on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And you could almost feel, you know, the industry was almost palpably ready to attack him over that, because these plants were in places where earthquakes don't happen.
Yeah.
And that happened on a Friday, as I recall, and on Sunday, Maine Yankee got hit by an earthquake. Now, it wasn't a huge earthquake, and it wasn't.
I wonder how Carter pulled that one off.
But the point is, Maine Yankee was shut down when the earthquake hit because Jimmy Carter had told them to shut down.
Yeah, yeah.
And Jimmy Carter is a guy who knew something about nuclear power, because he was one of the guys who cleaned up after a meltdown in Canada.
Well, that was his profession. He was a nuclear engineer. He was a Navy guy.
He was a Navy guy. That's right. That's why he was there. You know, he was a nuclear engineer / peanut farmer / president of the United States. Okay, so that was Sunday, and then also on Sunday we have 2 studies released by the Alberta government separately show that incidence of cancer downstream of tar sands development is higher than expected, and that air emissions from certain types of drilling tar sands — this is not mining tar sands, it's drilling tar sands —
Yeah.
drilling tar sands operation is likely to cause health problems. That sounds like fracking to me.
I couldn't get some images to put up about it, but the people up there are getting sick.
Yeah.
The people who've been doing the mining have just been slash and burn. We'll fix it later. What you're talking about, the first thing, of course, what they're doing is open pit mining. And we've seen pictures of that. It's horrible.
Yes.
Some of the tar
open pit mining
sands
always is, but
aren't accessible to the surface. They're further down. So they're sort of fracking.
Yeah.
I mean, they're drilling down. They're putting down hot solvents, melting the oil or dissolving the oil, bringing it back up, or dissolving the tar, really, the bitumen, bringing it up, refining it. And that's what they're getting out. And all of these things have side effects, and their attitude has been, well, we'll dump it in the river.
Yeah, well, we've
And,
seen.
you know, there's not a lot of people up there. A, B, are Native Americans, so maybe they
Who
don't
cares
count as
about
much.
Native Americans? Certainly not, you know, X, Y, and Z.
And C, it's a vast area. These guys have very tight connections with the Canadian government,
Yes.
and it's part of the geopolitical thing, too.
And the Native Americans, or as they call, what are they called?
First Nations.
First Nations, are not exactly delighted with this situation, and you can't blame them.
Well, what are they getting out of it? Sick.
Yeah. I think, you know, I wish everybody in the United States and Canada who was at least part of his heritage was First Nation or Native American knew it.
Yeah.
Knew it. Just if they knew it. I mean, I had an ancestor who was you know, in my family, the tribe has been lost. You know, but my ancestry is northern Western European, except for Native American.
You got some of that in there, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and a half Vietnamese granddaughter. So what can you say? Anyway, onwards and upwards. On the 7th, which was Monday, in many parts of the United States, the wind energy is now the cheapest form of electric generation, cheaper than natural gas and even coal. And this is not new coal, this is old coal. Next era Chief Financial Officer Morey P. Dewhurst recently stated in an earnings call. So this is NextEra, which is a large utility.
I got something about that.
Do you?
I don't have a picture, but I've got a quote.
Oh, okay, good. Let's hear it.
Now the cheapest means of generating electricity in many parts of the country. Net power generation from wind energy was up 19% year over year in 2014, meeting 4.13% of U.S. grid demand. That's practically nothing. They've got a long way to go.
Well,
from
they've
there.
got a long way to go, but with that percentage of growth, you know, it would be interesting. I don't have my calculator to figure out exactly how long it's going to take, but at 20% growth per year, 4% becomes really big, really
it's growing
fast.
quickly because it's economical.
Yeah.
Now, they mentioned further among the U.S. states, these are the biggest generators.
Texas?
No, not the top three. Iowa, 27.3.
Oh, in terms of percentage of their, yeah, go ahead.
29 in South Dakota. Okay, in gross amount it's
Yeah,
Texas, but
yeah.
just in percentage.
Yeah.
25, a quarter of South Dakota, 20% of Kansas came from wind energy.
Yeah.
The 11 states that produce more than 7% of their electricity from wind energy have seen their electricity prices fall by 0.37% over the last 5 years, while all the other states have seen their electricity prices increase by almost 8%.
What does that tell you, folks?
This is what it tells you. This is clear evidence for wind energy's impact on keeping consumers' electricity prices down.
Yeah, and actually solar will do the same thing.
Well, that picture there has nothing to do with wind, but it's an interesting picture of a factory.
Yeah.
Now,
That, by the way, is an artist's rendering. I don't know if, or it's computer generated.
I think, yeah, the roof is real.
The roof is real. The solar panels are not.
But
that
that
was-
sawtooth rooftop
Yeah.
was monumental in industrial areas throughout
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
And they're ideal for solar
Yeah.
because the windowed part of it, which you can't see, was facing north to get daylight in but not sunlight,
Right.
leaving the roof part facing south at a slant.
Isn't it amazing?
They're perfect for solar.
These people were psychics, you see. They knew that they could foresee the future. Knew
We
that
don't
it was
have
gonna
one of them, and I thought we did in Brattleboro, but we don't. I haven't seen
Okay.
a rooftop like that.
I don't know, but
you
we've
go
got a.
down country where there was a lot of manufacturing, and that was a very common kind of
If
roof.
you go to the rooftops in Brattleboro, I have no idea how much solar we could put on our rooftops, but my guess is that it would be substantial.
Well, Chris Grotke had some pictures of downtown
Yeah.
that he took from the top of the tower at the Brooks Hotel.
Oh, good.
So you can see all of downtown.
Yeah.
And almost every roof is flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody in a comment to his post mentioned, boy, what an opportunity for solar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are other opportunities too, like the south-facing wall of the parking garage.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. We
So-
don't think about south-facing walls and vertical.
Well, I
vertical
think we're
solar.
going to be in a point where people are going to be using them pretty soon.
Well, for no other reason than it's going to be making economic sense.
Yeah.
We're at that point now.
Yes, absolutely. Next item, the new solar strategy from the UK's Department of Energy and Climate Change. This is the DECC I see in the news very often. Envisions building a vast distributed network of solar hubs. That's what they call them, solar hubs, on buildings and brownfield sites. Unfortunately, it additionally envisions building new nuclear power plants. And there is a lot going on in Britain with renewable power and arguments over renewable power, because this government in UK government wants to limit wind on land
Onshore wind.
onshore wind. They want to expand offshore wind, but they're not terribly excited about it. They want to spend billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars and more on new nuclear power plants, which I think is an extremely unwise
Well,
thing
they're running
to
into a
do.
lot of problems there just getting the finance.
Yes.
And that's going to do it.
Yeah,
If you can't get
that's
the
right.
money, you're not
And,
going to
you know,
build
their solar people are saying, "Why are you going for nuclear? We could give you solar a whole lot cheaper and a whole lot faster."
It's politics.
Yeah, of course it is. And in the meantime, they're trying to prevent the Scots from becoming independent, and telling them, if you people are independent, we aren't going to buy the power you produce.
That's politics, too.
That's politics. Boy, I'll tell you.
That's blackmail.
Wow.
That's
And
blackmail.
the Scots are after 100% renewable by 2020, and it looks like they're probably going to get there. And if they leave Britain, it's going to leave what is left of the UK is going to be about 9% renewable, with a target of 20% by 2020.
Well, you can't say the Scots aren't stubborn. And they're likely to react to Britain's attempt to blackmail them by going
In exactly the same way they reacted to Donald Trump. You know, what can you say to that? Okay. Okay, moving on. Nations are, that by the way was from Clean Technica again, Business Spectator. Nations are running out of time to use their fossil fuels and stay below agreed limits on global warming, according to a draft UN study to be approved this week. I can't tell you the number of articles I've seen that talked about a leaked copy of this study. Temperatures have already risen about 0.8 of a degree Celsius since 1900, and are set to go past 2 degrees in coming decades. And people say, degrees? 0.8 of a degree? Why does that bother us? But have you ever heard of the blizzard of '86?
Oh, yeah.
1886?
Yeah, yeah.
That and the Schoolhouse blizzard, which happened a couple of months earlier, which was, I think, possibly the worst blizzard. These are among the 2 worst blizzards that ever hit the United States.
Well, '86 hit New York City bad, and of course I grew up in New York City.
Unbelievable.
So
the
that was
pictures of that,
legendary.
it was legendary. And people were in terrible trouble, because many people who lived in tenements had depended on coal for their heat,
Yeah.
and they would buy coal with their groceries because they had no place to store it. And the coal was not being delivered. So for a period of about 2 weeks. So in the middle of the aftermath of a blizzard, they had no heat. And the snow in the middle of the streets in New York was 6, 8, 10 feet deep.
Yeah.
And there were no snow plows. They didn't have those in those days. And this was right after a blizzard that hit the Midwest called the Schoolhouse blizzard, because it hit so suddenly that children were in school when it hit. And a lot of people died, particularly a lot of people in those schoolhouses. And it was just a very sad thing. That resulted from a world temperature change downward of 1 degree Fahrenheit.
Is that so?
Yes.
Wow.
This is what happens when you have start screwing around with it.
We don't think much about the temperature change and its effect.
No, but it's absolutely huge. Anyway, that was that. Okay, that the next is in the same day, and then we're getting back to ExxonMobil. Exxon's, this is a quote. It's a title. Exxon's climate change response: consummate arrogance. That's the title. After ExxonMobil's uncharacteristically
That's
public
McKibben.
response, that's Bill
That's this
McKibben.
guy.
There you are.
Consummate,
To
that's
shareholder
exactly what it
requests for
says.
information about the company's climate change mitigation efforts, climate activist Bill McKibben denounced its report as arrogant provocations. And, as one friend of mine says, they're going down.
Yeah, there's Bill up there now.
Bill is up there.
This is what he said. This is a quote. We've never thought there was a small flaw in their business plan that could be altered by negotiation. We've always thought that their business plan was to keep pouring carbon into the atmosphere, and indeed, Exxon's statements are easy to translate. Now it's a quote of a quote. We plan on overheating the planet, and we think we have the political muscle to keep doing it, and we dare you to stop it. And now it's Bill McKibben talking, and they're right, unless we build a big and powerful movement that'll continue to dominate our political life and keep change from ever taking place.
Well, Christiana Figueres is right there with Bill McKibben, and she's the head of the Climate Change Committee at the United Nations. And you know, I think what we're seeing here is a confrontation of a global scale. Really, it's a global scale confrontation between those people who want to have a future and those people who want the money now.
Exactly. That's the best way to describe it.
But anyway, we have to stop the things. And
this is a quote that's related to that, and it's real quick. The window is shutting on a 2-degree target.
Yeah. Well,
Reuters. It's a quote from Reuters.
Yeah.
World powers are running out of time to slash their use of high-polluting fossil fuels and stay below agreed limits in global warming. A draft UN study to be approved this week shows. You've referred to that study already.
Yeah, the IPCC study. Yeah, and that study has been up in the news over and over and over and over again. So, are we ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay. On the
got you up
8th,
again.
which is Tuesday. It's nice of you to point that out to me so I want to show everybody my suspenders. Somebody said those are ridiculous, and I said, yeah. That's what it keeps people awake when they're looking at me.
Why did the fireman wear red suspenders? Right?
I don't know why.
Keep his pants up.
Wow. And here I thought it was because he wanted to look like me. Right, okay. All right. We have to be talking about renewables, and these suspenders, I suspect, are not. Tuesday, 8th of April, renewables excluding hydropower accounted for 8.5% of global electricity generation, up from 7.8% in 2012. According to research by the United Nations Environmental Program and Bloomberg New Energy Finance. And that came from Thomson Reuters Foundation. Now, the next two items kind of tie with that. From 7.8% to 8.5% is, it's not a wonderful increase, but it's 10%. That's a good increase for any kind of business. It's not really what we need, though. We need to have twice that. But the first one is this. Global investments in renewable energy slumped 14% last year, with China pouring more money into the sector than Europe for the first time on record. And guess who's number 3? The United States. Investments in, comparing to Europe and China, investments in non-hydro renewables fell from 35.1 billion, from 214.4 billion, I'm sorry, they fell by 35.1 billion to 214.4 billion in 2013, according to a report from the UN. Now, the investment fell, but they're growing. All right?
Well, yeah, what's happening is various different types of subsidies are coming and going and coming and going and coming here and going there.
Yeah.
The investors are confused.
Yes.
Some of them are holding back, saying, we'll wait till next year.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, the trend is upward.
Yes, that's right. And here is a little bit more of an explanation. That came from a publication called Rappler. This one is from New Scientist. Almost half of new electricity generation is now renewable, and the costs of wind and solar power are falling sharply. It should give governments confidence to forge a robust climate agreement next year, says the director of the UN Environment Program. That from New Scientist. And that, I think, as you said, what's happening is the people who invest in renewable energy are kind of holding off to see where they want to put it. They don't want to put it in Australia at all until Australia cleans up its act. We've got organizations like ALEC and Koch Industries and so forth trying to get states to reduce the amount of renewable that they have in the renewable energy
They
standards.
haven't been very successful.
They have not been very successful. They were defeated in Kansas, which
Kansas.
is in Kansas. Well, here you are. You know, Koch Industries is in Kansas, and they're trying to convince the state to reduce its renewable energy standard. All right. Kansas is getting a lot of its electricity from wind already.
One of the ones we mentioned.
And people in Kansas know what it is to have wind farms around and know what the effect is on their energy bills and know that if they're going to be going to renewables or if they're going to be making a lot less, they're going to have a lot more money left over, they're going to be spending a lot less on their electric bills. You know, and this little town, it's not a town, city, Greensburg, people are saying we get 100% of our energy from wind 100% of the time. You know, this is intermittent power? No, not to them. They get 100% of their energy. They're always getting power from the wind. And they live practically in the middle of a wind farm. They've got, in a city that is 1.5 miles long and less than 1.25 miles wide, they're getting, they have 14 or 15 wind turbines in the city.
I'll have to try and get a picture of that.
Oh, there was one that we had last did we have
I don't think
it?
that was that town, though. That was the one up in Alberta. The small one.
The little town with a hospital? I will send you the picture. Because the wind turbine that runs the hospital is about 80 feet from the hospital door. It gives you a whole new picture of what a hospital quiet zone is.
Those people at the hospital up all night.
Oh yeah. I don't know. They seem to love it. I was talking to the woman who answers the phone for the town, and I said, "What do you think about the noise?" And she, nobody ever complains about the noise. How close do you live to a wind turbine? Oh, about 2 blocks. Okay. Anyway, let's see. That was the one from the New Scientist. A recent study from the National Renewable Energy Lab, which is called NREL, and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory specifically addressed the value of demand response. Now, this is really interesting. Adjusting consumer demand during peak times by putting demand response resources into a commercial production cost model. Now here,
Graph of that.
this is
I
a
don't understand it.
well, this is a confusing graph. Those things at the bottom, I can't read it, but the things at the bottom of the graph, the colored parts, the red and
The one on the very bottom, the purple one, is residential.
okay,
The greenish one above that is industrial,
Yeah.
non-manufacturing.
right,
The blue one isn't labeled.
Okay.
Oh, the dark blue one is municipal.
okay, and then
I guess the top one is adding them together.
okay. Now you'll notice and maybe people can't really see except in the middle of the graph. That graph has spikes that just go up and down and up and down and up and down.
Yeah, that's
And
instantaneous.
That's instantaneous. Is this a 24-hour period, Tom? I think it
a
is.
yearly period.
Oh, it's a yearly period. Well, there's a lot of big spikes and a lot of drops, and what they're saying in effect, and that thing that goes above it all, I think is the cumulative effect. Basically, the demand goes up and goes down very rapidly, and it will go up to a figure which is not quite double what it is at the low.
Mm-hmm.
And
What this shows.
and what they're saying in this demand response thing is, give you an example of how demand response works. In the future, we have a smart grid, and the grid says, okay, the current price of electricity to you is 24 cents, and you say, I don't want to pay 24 cents for electricity. Mm-hmm. The only thing I want to run at 24 cents is the LED over my desk, which is 5 watts or something like that. Well, okay, if you've got your house on a smart circuit, you can say shut down the circuits that are, these circuits.
Do it from your computer keyboard.
That's right. These circuits I want to be dead if the price is 24 cents a kilowatt hour. These circuits I want to be dead if the price is 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Shut the whole house off if the price goes above $1 a kilowatt hour. Whatever. because these changes are extremely rapid.
You make the decision.
You make the decision. What happens is when the power is sold over the smart grid and people start bowing out of the market, you stabilize the grid. Mm-hmm. You see? Mm-hmm. So that's what they're talking about, is that you can have an entirely different paradigm if you decide to stabilize the grid. You like
paradigm,
that?
Huh?
Yeah, isn't that a great word?
Good word.
I like it. Okay.
I dig it.
I used to work with a guy who called it paradigm. And I said to him, it's paradigm, if you want to be correct. And he could never remember that. He was always confused. Maybe he didn't believe me. Okay. He might have been. Here's one we're now to Wednesday, yesterday, the 9th of April. Of the decline in investment in renewable power capacity, 80% resulted from falling cost of renewable energy technology. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. With the remaining 20% was a drop in actual construction activity, thanks largely to the uncertain fate of government subsidies. Well, I don't know how much we want to talk about that, but it's interesting that 80% of that drop was because of a drop in costs, and it just underlines one big problem for the fossil fuel industry and the utilities, and that is, with the costs going down as fast as they are, and this thing being in the market position that it is, the move away from fossil fuels is going to be very strongly based on the high cost of fossil fuels in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the market is going to take care of it.
$545 billion a year worldwide is put into subsidies for that company, group, ExxonMobil and the other companies that are with it, which are saying, we're going to sell this stuff until the world cooks.
It's interesting you mention that, because here are these people trying to eliminate subsidies for fossil fuels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meanwhile, they're sucking up huge subsidies.
Huge subsidies, exactly.
And they've been doing it for a century.
That's right.
But we've got to get rid of these subsidies. Well, it's really only a matter of time before the renewables don't need subsidies anymore.
Actually, that's why Germany is taking its subsidies away from renewables now.
So we're almost at that point now.
We are
They're
about
going to
there.
stand on their own.
Yeah.
And these guys, well, we would not have a nuclear plant if it wasn't for Price Anderson.
That's right.
That's a huge subsidy.
Yes.
The oil depletion allowance that nobody even knows about is
Yes.
another huge. You know what that is, guys? If you sell your oil, you get a tax write-off. Because you don't have it to sell anymore. It's been depleted.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I got to give them credit. They're clever.
Clever, yes.
And they're powerful.
And they're powerful. Doesn't make them good. Clever, powerful, and without a conscience.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about something which is first psychotic.
That's the exact word. That's the exact word.
Yes. Okay. Now, this is one that Tom is very fond of, so I'm going to read it and I'm going to let him do a lot of commentary because he's been sitting there silently for the last 10 minutes. Have you? Oregon State University chemists have found that cellulose, the most abundant organic polymer on Earth, probably the most organic polymer on Earth. I don't see why they would put the word organic in there. And a key component of trees and just about every other plant, can be heated in a furnace in the presence of ammonia and turned into building blocks for supercapacitors. Supercapacitors is from Science Daily. What is a supercapacitor?
Just a very, very efficient capacitor.
And a capacitor is?
Well, in its simplest form, it's two conductive plates,
Right.
separated by an insulator.
Right.
And because they're separated, they have the ability to accumulate charge. Electrons, if you will, on one plate.
Let me ask you a question here. If I go shuffling my feet across a shaggy rug,
Yeah.
does that make me a capacitor? Or a plate in a
I suppose you could be a plate. Yeah,
I'm a plate in a
and
capacitor.
I'm not moving there. You know,
Yeah.
between the two of us, we would have a potential between us.
And
if we shake hands, we get fight.
right, and that's the discharge of the capacitor that you and I have made, with the insulation being air between us.
Here, now we're in a situation now where energy storage would be a very useful thing. A lot of renewals are intermittent. The best solution to that is to save the energy. So we're using conventional battery technology, which hasn't changed much in 100 years.
Yeah,
And it's getting better,
yeah,
but it hasn't solved the problem.
yeah,
It really hasn't solved the problem. They got some huge battery banks that are the size of this building.
yeah.
They don't have to be. Capacitors have the ability to save electricity as well. They don't do it chemically, they do it electrically.
Which means that they're not going to get destroyed by repeated charge and discharge.
Let's just say
They'll last a
they'll
long
last
time.
Much, much longer.
And they can be very cheap.
They can be. Now, the American industry has concentrated on batteries. Matter of fact, most of the world has concentrated on batteries. But the Koreans have been working on capacitors.
Interesting.
Now, this is an American deal here. And what they basically found out is that by treating ordinary paper, they use it as an example, cellulose filter paper, like you used to make coffee. Treating it with this ammonia. That's not household ammonia, it's the ammonia gas.
Yep,
They come up with a form of char.
yep,
It is char.
yep.
A specialized form of char, which is extremely thin, pure carbon, which can be your capacitive plate. Now, here we got a situation where the process is giving off methane,
Which you can burn for
which you
energy.
burn, and it's giving it off in rather large quantities because there's a lot of hydrogen in the ammonia.
Yeah,
There's a lot of carbon
in the cellulose. Yeah,
So they're generating a lot of methane.
yeah,
They've got this char that's very usable form of char, and they've got paper. And conceivably, they could roll this off an assembly line very similar to the way you make two-ply toilet paper. Roll it all up, and you've got a huge capacitor.
right. Which
I mean,
means when you
they're
go to
years
the
away from this being practical.
yeah.
But
Well, they
it
said
could
3
revolutionize everything
3 years was what they wanted to do for the research.
their process.
Yeah, for their process.
But by the time it comes down to where we could build one of these in the Boise Cascade plant in Brattleboro, which we could, and run the electricity right into the grid right there. It'd be 10 years before we could do that.
But
But it
now
can be done.
capacitors discharge all at once. But you could have
They can discharge all at once.
Ah.
They have that capability. And that's where they've been most useful, because they'll
Okay.
discharge instantly.
Yeah.
Like a flash bulb. Mm-hmm. That's
I had that
capacitive
happen in
discharge.
my computer one day.
I don't think that's a good thing.
It stopped working.
But if you put them through a load, they're going to discharge through the load slowly.
Okay.
They don't have to discharge fast.
Okay. So they can act pretty much like a battery
They
if they're
can act
designed to
like
do
a
it.
battery.
Okay.
They can. Basically, a ordinary lead-acid battery can be considered to be a capacitor. They have things called electrolytic capacitors that are very much chemically the same as batteries.
Okay.
So they're not all that different. You know?
Yeah. Okay.
And so I'm looking at something like this as being capable of really revolutionizing the way we store energy and the way we produce energy.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me about this is they're talking about using carbon for this. And the carbon is not heavy. And carbon is not expensive. We're not talking about
Nothing about this is
Yeah, we're not talking about cadmium. We're not even talking about silicon. We're talking about carbon. And you know, one of the things that's interesting about this is that the process, this is going to be a very highly pure carbon, but the process of manufacturing these things is going to purify it. It's going to purify it.
That's what makes this so attractive to me. This is such a simple concept.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll take a little while before they iron out all the
And
bugs.
when you're done with your capacitor, you can just bury it and it'll be biochar. I think the point that I'm making is we don't have big problems with this that I can see that would produce pollution.
Not really. No.
So-
That's why I'm so impressed by this.
Yeah.
I really think this is
This is a good one.
this
This is a good one.
This is a biggie.
So let's go on, unless you need to say more on that.
Not much more to say, really.
Okay.
I'm going to find out more about it.
Okay.
I'll probably contact this guy.
Yep.
I want to talk to him about it.
Yep.
I'm impressed.
Next, the role of utilities is being questioned as technology changes. We've been talking about that, but apparently the folks at Dominion Virginia Power have been talking about it. They are establishing microgrids, which can be separated and provide power to communities without any support from the bulk power grid as pilot projects. So the Dominion Virginia Power is experimenting with microgrids.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're experimenting with that in terms of their business model. And
So they're looking to make money on it.
they're looking to make
is
money
fine.
on it. I have no problem with that. But, this is the model that I think we really have to go to. These microgrids are distributed power, and it is going, and you could do it in Vermont. We've said this before, with every community in Vermont capable of providing its own power, which means that when the grid goes down, everybody just keeps on going with their lives.
I think eventually something like this is going to happen just because it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think so.
I think the future of the grid is not going to be one big grid, but a grid of grids.
Yeah,
There's going to be a network of grids.
a network of grids. Yeah,
And they're all going to be interconnected, but they're all going to be able to stand alone.
yeah,
And it's going to happen just because it's a good idea.
yeah. Next, the German government approved a reform of their energy transformation, the Energiewende, to reduce subsidies for renewables and stem the rising electricity rates. The reform plan is still designed to meet 80% of its energy needs with renewables by 2050, and I'm beginning to think that's a little bit I think it could be more ambitious. It's a little bit unambitious. 80% by 2050 just strikes me as being something that is
They could do it faster than that.
much, much faster. But
So, something funny seems to be happening there because it makes sense. A lot of the Germans are putting up solar on the roofs.
yeah,
So they're buying less electricity.
yes,
So the electricity that's left, the power producers have to charge more for it.
yes,
But these guys are buying less.
that's right.
So actually they're saving money.
They're saving money.
And
But
I
I think
suspect that maybe the electricity producers aren't passing on all the savings from the subsidies.
I would guess. But
But it'll work itself out.
we should remind everybody when they say that when the news says that their electric rates have gone up 12.5% or something like that in the last year, that's not the electric rates for everybody. That's the electric rates for the people who are not putting up solar on their roofs or joining an electric
Exactly.
co-op.
Yeah.
And about 40% of the population is, and the rest of the population is that group which probably has not chosen to do so yet.
And it's industry.
And it's
And
industry's
it's
doing
getting
the
on the
same
ball.
too. They're getting onto it too.
They're getting on the ball.
Among the smallest percentage groups investing in renewable power is the utilities. It's really crazy. The world has been turned on its head. So next,
Called inertia.
today, and we found this in the news. And this comes from Business Week. Emissions from transportation may rise at a faster rate of all at the fastest rate of all major sources through 2050. The United Nations will say on the report that is due on April 13th. Everybody knows what's in this report. Heat trapping gases from vehicles may surge 71% from 2010 levels, mainly from emerging technologies. And I happen to think in this particular case, they are flat out wrong. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because I think electric vehicles are going to dominate the market by 2020, and they will be basically the only things available by 2030.
As soon as we have this infrastructure available
Right.
to charge these things when and where they need charging,
Yeah.
the gas car is over.
Yeah. Yep. And you see China, for example, the streets in China are just filled with cars. most of those people are not going out for joyrides. They don't need to go very far in those cars.
I had some pictures to show, and they're all the same picture. They're making a traffic jam.
And they're scary traffic jams because you can almost you can imagine just opening your car window and feeling the pollution in the air, because you can see the pollution in the thing. Now we've got 6 minutes left, and 5 minutes actually, because we started with a minute to go to the thing, and we have to talk about two of these, and they're both related. So I'm just going to read them both out, and then we'll talk.
All right.
First, Entergy is asking federal regulators for permission to end off-site emergency planning 16 months after the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant shuts down. And I will point out that's before the spent fuel pool is emptied by years and years.
I've got something.
NRC staffers are evaluating the request.
Yeah, I've got something on that.
And the other one is,
You've all seen this map out there. This
Yeah.
is the evacuation zone.
yeah,
And basically, what they're saying is, after 17 months, it's not going to be dangerous enough, so we don't have to worry about evacuating.
yeah. The next one is disagreements between Entergy Nuclear and the Agency of Natural Resources surfaced this week. I think this is a Vermont Agency of Natural Resources.
I've got some on that too.
In exchange of letters over the proposed draft permit for Vermont Yankees continuing thermal discharge into the Connecticut River.
Yep.
Now, what the Agency of Natural Resources is saying is, you don't have permission to do this anymore, and we don't want to give it to you because you're making that river unlivable for probably hundreds of millions of fish who die every year, which are mostly fry.
This is exactly what they're saying. Entergy wants permission to increase the temperature of the river water by up to 13.4 degrees.
Right.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
But read on in that, because there's
Yeah,
a
at the heart of the issue. This is the heart of the issue.
Yeah.
The Yankee will be forced to operate in a closed cycle by utilizing its cooling tower,
which
What are they
costs
there
a
for?
lot of money.
And avoiding the discharging of 523 million gallons of hot water into the Connecticut.
Right.
And in the process, losing millions of dollars of revenue.
Right. Millions of dollars of revenue, folks.
The issue of thermal discharge and the state permit was not included in the far-ranging settlement agreement, including an agreement to drop all litigation between Entergy and Shumlin. This is a separate
We
deal.
might have a separate set
This
of
is separate.
litigation going on here.
Yeah, this is a separate deal. And it's not a technical problem. All they gotta do is throw a switch, and the water goes through.
It's a financial problem.
They want them-
It is a financial problem. That cooling tower system, by the way, is the one that fell apart a few years ago.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, really. And one of the things that they mentioned in the news was that apparently a check of the record showed that Entergy had been in violation by being in excess of the amount of water that they were, the temperature of the water that they were allowed to use 60% of the time they were in operation.
Oh, yeah.
That is a problem, as far as I'm concerned.
You mean the water they were putting into the river?
Was too hot. It was
hot.
hotter than they were allowed to do 60% of the time. Now, if they are not allowed to do that, that means they're going to have to reduce their power output over the summer.
Yeah.
Which means that not only are they paying to use the cooling towers, because it is expensive, but they're also not going to be making as much money on the nuclear power.
Mm-hmm.
And their termination point for the plant is based on the end of the year, but it's also based on the fact that they would have expected to close down in October, and they have decided to run to the end of the year in order to use up the fuel as much as they can. And if they don't run at full speed over the summer, they're going to have more fuel
So they're gonna wanna
left.
extend it a
They're going to want to extend it. I don't know that this is going to be a problem in the end, but it has the appearance of having a problem. Now, it's time to end our hourly show.
Yeah, we're about a minute and a half or something like
No,
that.
actually, we started a minute
We
early
started
on the clock, so
I
it's
got
time to
some
close.
pictures here.
Well, you know what? I think we're going to have to leave that for the next after the thing. We should say goodbye to people.
Yeah.
Bye, people. See you next time. Here,
Adios.
and then we're going to show Tom's pictures. This is one of these beautiful things about television. You know, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it.